Hey everyone, Kadabra Guy here. Hope the new year is treating you well. This is going to be another unscripted video. I have a longer, more involved project that I've been working on ever since I released the ZA video back in October. It's taking much longer than I anticipated, so this video is just going to be a little thing I put out just to show you all. I still have my login, I still know how to make videos. This one's just much bigger than I anticipated. I don't want to get your hopes up too much. It's a creative thing, but I'm not doing any ROM hack or any Fakemon stuff. I'm going to put some silhouettes on the screen, and if you know, you know. So that might give you a little idea of what's to come in the next upload, hopefully. For today, though, I decided to do something a little different. I wanted to discuss which gens introduced the best Pokemon of each type. We're just looking at the new Pokemon added from that generation and how good they are, in my subjective opinion. Something to note that anything added in that generation counts. So current Gen 9, that would be Scarlet and Violet. That would be the DLC for Scarlet and Violet. That would be Legend ZA, all the new Megas. Changing Pokemon's type in a future gen will impact the original gen's score for that type. So for example, Gen 1, its only Steel types are Magnemite and Magneton, because Steel didn't exist when Gen 1 was current. They do count towards Gen 1 Steel type score, even though they were not actually Steel type in Gen 1. I think the only real impact this will have is on the Rotom appliances and the Fairy types, but it's just worth putting that out there now. At the same time, new forms for old Pokemon do not count for the original gen, so things like regional forms and Mega Evolutions, those will be counted towards the gen they were introduced, not the generation of the original Pokemon. So as I go through each type, I wanted to give my thoughts not only on the generation that I think does it best, but two of the runners-up, because I can already guarantee there's going to be some generations that I don't give any props to, and I should probably try and acknowledge where they do things right, even if I don't think they're the best of that specific type. That's basically the premise for today. This is going to be a very subjective video, and I just want to jump into it with our first type, the normal type. Starting off with normal, I didn't really know what to expect going in. Normal is basically the catch-all type. If we don't know what type you are normal. So normal designs can range from being really mundane to being really wacky to being really cool, actually. And so it has definitely some of the most variants, not only in the series as a whole, but even per gen. I think the best overall selection of normal types does have to go to Generation 1. Obviously, you got so many standout designs. You've got Eevee, Snorlax, Ditto, all of which are insanely popular. Even the ones that aren't the fan favorites, even the ones that don't push merchandise, I think are incredibly solid. You've got Jigglypuff, you've got Chansey, you've got Porygon is definitely a favorite of mine. Even by Generation 1's pretty tame design standards, normal is allowed to get pretty weird, which I appreciate. I think probably the low point is just how many birds there are, but overall, I think the number of absolute peak normal type designs in this gen is really hard for any of the other gens to compete with. My personal second place, and this won't surprise long-term viewers of the channel, is going to go to Generation 6. So the actual normal types in Kalos are pretty tame, I won't deny. I'm not a huge Diggersby fan. I like Pyroar, but I understand if not a lot of people do. And I think we all like Heliolisk. I don't think that's controversial. But the really interesting thing about them is how diverse the normal types, secondary types got in Gen 6. Previously, you had Girafarig dropping normal Psychic in Gen 2. You had Bibarel dropping normal Water in Gen 4. And then you got 2 in Gen 5. You got Sawsbuck with Grass, and you got Meloetta with normal Fighting. But really, there wasn't a lot of experimentation with the normal types. They were almost always pure normal or normal flying. And I really appreciate Generation 6 for getting weird with it and having so many dual types. You have the normal electric, normal fire, normal ground. All of these Pokemon could have just been pure normal type or maybe pure the other type. And I really appreciate that this was the generation where they started to do fun stuff with the normal type. The Megas don't really impact Gen 6's score too much. I'm mostly giving it this rank because I appreciate the Kalos normal types. And third place is honestly a bit of a surprise to me. It's going to be Generation 8. I have played Sword and Shield for a couple of hours, but I don't actually own the game myself. I borrowed a friend's copy. But I do really like the Galarian Zigzagoon line. I really like Wooloo, and Legends Arceus has 3 amazing normal type lines. Obviously, Squavit and Greedent kind of drag the score down a bit for me. I don't really care about Indeedee, but this is still a really good selection of normal types and kind of caught me off guard. I don't think it's controversial to say that Generation 3 has not a single bad grass type. Even the ones that I think are a little weak, like Seedot and Shroomish, evolve into stuff that becomes much, much cooler pretty quickly. Breloom is my favorite Pokemon of all time. Tropius, Ludicolo, the Shiftry line with that Tengu inspiration is very cool. The starter, Trico, is amazing in all 3 stages. Grovyle obviously gets a popularity boost from Mystery Dungeon, but even outside of that, it's just a very solid design. And I know some people prefer Grovyle over Sceptile. I'm not going to go that far. I think the line is amazing in all 3 stages, which, as we all know, is hard for a lot of starter lines to pull off. There's that Manjay TV video where he wants to be the Grass-type gym leader. I must admit, I had the same idea. I've done a playthrough myself of only grass types, going through the whole game, trying to earn my spot as the grass-type gym leader. That desire for a grass-type gym leader in Hoenn is in no small part because of how great the grass-type selection is in Generation 3. Like, there is just so much to choose from, and it's kind of crazy that they put an ice-type leader in with only 3 ice types, but grass did not get any representation whatsoever. I think second place, once again, is going to go to Generation 6. This is definitely my own bias speaking, but I love the Skiddo line, I love the Phantump line. Not as fond of Gourgeist specifically, but Pumpkaboo by itself is very solid. The Megas are pretty limited, but you still have Sceptile, you've got Abomasnow, Venusaur in particular. It's one of the best Mega designs in terms of how its stats completely change the way that it plays. So you have 2 different play styles depending if you're going Mega Venusaur or regular Venusaur. However, you cannot, in any instance, rank Gen 6 as the best grass-type representation when it is also the generation that introduced Quilladin. I'm going to be so real. I think Chespin is the best designed of the 3 initial starters out of Froakie and Fennekin. Quilladin shut me right off. I've never used Chestnut a single time because I've never wanted to sit through Quilladin. I hope the Quilladin fans get their day and they rise up, but for the time being, man, God no, that shit is not making my top 1. Third was a toss-up between Generations 5 and 7. Both of them have few, if any, flops in the grass types. I really like a lot of the selection both generations have. Ultimately, it did boil down to I don't really care for Superior that much, whereas I think Rowlet is probably my favorite starter line of all time. From start to finish, I love Rowlet, I love Decidueye, I love Dartrix. People bash on Dartrix all the time, I don't get why, he's fun. So I did give the edge to Generation 7, became my top 3. So the tier list I'm making this visual for actually puts fire before grass. And you may have noticed, yeah, that I skipped from fire straight to grass. Now I'm going back to fire. The sole reason for that is because I did not want to start this video off with me glazing Generation 1. But unfortunately, when you look at the fire type selection in Generation 1, there is no alternative. You have to go Gen 1 on the fire type. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the world's biggest Charizard hater and you hate that fucking lizard. There is no way you cannot understand why Charizard is so fucking sick. And like, sure, it might be overhyped. I'm not going to deny that. It might be pushed a little too far. But it's still an incredibly amazing design, and it deserves a lot of love, maybe just not the amount it's getting right now. Even besides Charizard, you've got Arcanine, one of the most classic designs. Casual fans who haven't played Pokemon since the first game came out remember Arcanine. That's how iconic the design is. Even some of the simpler designs like Ponyta and Ninetales, they feel elegant in their simplicity. They don't feel lacking, they just feel like they're doing all they need to and not a bit more. They're not overstepping their design, I feel. And of course, having an evolution doesn't hurt. I think the only unpopular design from the fire types would probably be Magmar. I have gaslit myself into liking Magmar ever since I edited that stupid boober joke for the Slowpoke video.
Are you saying boo or boo bird? I was saying boo bird.
Even if that, amazing joke didn't sway you, this is just one flop with all of this heat going on over here. No shot. No shot any gen takes it over Gen 1, I'm afraid. Third time in a row, second place, I'm going to give up to Gen 6. I'm going to give it up for Gen 6. Again, I'm a big Pyroar fan. I don't get why, but I love Pyroar. I like Talonflame. Delphox is the most consistent, I think, of the starters. It's probably like my second favorite in all the lines, and it's pretty solid overall. But the real heat here comes from the Mega selection. You get Houndoom, you get Camerupt, you get Blaziken, you get 2 Charizards, and you get to steal Groudon, who's not even a fire type normally. He just becomes a fire type in Gen 6. Obviously, I didn't want to rank it higher because a lot of Gen 6's firepower, if you excuse the pun, is reliant on the Megas and on design from older generations, but I do think all of the fire type Megas look sick, they look good. You could argue if they look better or worse than their original, I don't care, they're all good. And the base Kalos fire types are also pretty solid, even if they're a little limited. Third place for me is going to be Generation 9. I have mentioned this before in my previous unscripted video. I don't give a single shit about the Charcadet line, but it's not bad, and that is probably my least favorite of the fire types. So if my least favorite's not that bad, I'm loving Scovillain. I love Fuecoco and Skeletor. You've got 2 really good Paradox Pokemon in Iron Moth and Gouging Fire. Chi-Yu is my second favorite of the Ruination Quartet. And having an Ogerpon form and a Tauros form definitely doesn't hurt. The ZA Megas are a little hit and miss. They don't hurt Gen 9 score. I don't know if they really raise it like Generation 6's does. I hate to do it. I really hate to do it. I did not picture myself as a Gen 1er going into this video, but I'm sorry. Gen 1 kind of goes crazy with the water type here. I'm not even a big Squirtle guy. I think Squirtle is the weakest of the Gen 1 starters, and it's not close, but it's still pretty good. But then you've also got Lapras, you've got Psyduck, you've got Poliwhirl, you've got Starmie, then you've got Gyarados and Vaporeon, and both fossils, and you've got Slowpoke, which, as many of you know, I've dedicated 2 entire videos to talking about how good the Slowpoke design is and how more Pokemon should emulate that design. This is an insane amount of high-quality water types. And yeah, Gen 1 also does have a lot of the worst water types. Gen 1, it's kind of a roulette. You're either going to get some of the peakest water type to ever come out, or you're going to get a fucking koi fish, or just Seal, whose name is Seal, and he is a seal. But outside of, I want to say about like 6 to 8 kind of cringe designs, there is just 20 odd amazing water types here. And again, I hate to give so much props to Gen 1. I think this paints me in a bad light, but I don't care. It's the truth, and I will not compromise on the truth for my own personal image. And believe it or not, Gen 6 is not in this one. We finally did it. We found a type that Gen 6 did not pop off on. Actually, second place is going to be Gen 3, my other biased generation. You do have some forgettable water types. You got Whiscash, you got Clamperl, but then you've also got the Lotad line. You've got the Carvanha line. You've got the Wailmer line. You got the Wingull line. And then you get like the actual big guns. Then you get Spheal. Then you get Melodic. And then Mudkip. And then Kyogre, man. I genuinely think that if Generations 1 and 3 swapped Pokemon, this lineup would probably beat out Kantos simply for just being more iconic. Unfortunately, Gen 1 did come out first. It has a stronger foothold in the culture, but Gen 3 is such a dominant water type showing. It was very hard to decide between these two. Honestly, probably the closest race for the top 3 altogether, because Gen 2, you look at those water types, again, full of icons. You've got Suicune, Kingdra, you've got Marill, you got Wooper, you got Politoed, Chinchou, the Totodile line. I think Gen 2 strikes a better balance between its water types than Gens 1 and 3, The peaks are not as high, but the valleys are not as low. So it's a more consistent, good average overall. The first 3 regions of water types are all insanely good, and I looked through the others just to make sure it wasn't even close. Nothing compares to how good this water type lineup is. Alright, I'm sick of glazing Gen 1. Let's move on to the next type, which on the tier list is going to be it's going to be Ice. We're going to be talking about the Ice type next. Generation 4 has the best Ice types, and I don't think it's particularly close. I think this is an insanely good lineup of Ice types. It is true that the bulk of Sinnoh's Ice types are evolutions for previous Ice types, but I don't hold that as too much of a detriment. I think a lot of the designs of the Gen 4 really do feel like the completed version of those original designs. Those original designs do feel lacking without these evolutions. Even if you dock points for originality, I can't dock enough to make up for how insanely cool all of these Ice types are, pardon the pun. There's not a single bad Ice type in Sinnoh's selection here, and they are all incredibly diverse and varied. A lot of the other Ice types in other regions kind of feel samey. I think the immediate next generation kind of embodies that pretty well. All of them are the same shades of white and light blue. Then Kyurem throws in gray, but they all look so samey and it's cringe. Whereas Generation 4, you've got Weavile with these dark colors and the red collar. You've got Mamoswine with the brown fur and the little bit of blue and white to still add a little coldness to the design. You've got Snover and Abomasnow with the white and the green. Green's a very fun color for an Ice type. You've got Frostlass, a little more traditional Ice type, but still, very interesting colors with the purple and the red highlights there. They all look so distinct, but they all still feel cold. They feel like Ice types. And for an added bonus, we even get a Rotom appliance. And Rotom is peak, Rotom is sick. There is no contest here. Generation 4, easily best Ice type selection. Not a single miss. Second place, I'm going to give to Generation 9. I'm actually a big Baxcalibur hater. I don't think that's an uncommon opinion. I think the fanbase is pretty divided on Baxcalibur. And like many of the Baxcalibur haters, I'm actually a big Arctibax fan. If Baxcalibur leaned more into the Spinosaurus theme that Arctibax has going on here, I think it could have been a lot better instead of just being Frozen Tyranitar. But that's just the low point. I love Titan, I love Iron Bundle, Mega Frostlass from ZA, and Shenpao, I still think is a ferret. I don't think that's a snow leopard. But okay, I'll concede. Perhaps an Ermine? True? I love that video. I'm pulling up that video right now. Really good Ice types overall. Not as much variety as Gen 4, but still pretty cool. Gen 3 is going to be third. I was bashing Gen 3 for not a lot of variety earlier, but I do think what they have is amazing. The Snorunt line gets a lot of love, weirdly. They're like one of the only full evolutionary lines available in Pokemon Snap, which I think says quite a bit. The Spheal, everyone loves Spheal. Say what you want about the evolutions, but Spheal itself is so perfect. And I love all the Regis, and Regice is no exception. So again, really limited here, but you got some good variety in what you do have. I'm not going to dodge it any longer. We got to talk about the Electric type. Unfortunately, it's another Gen 1 win. I'm sorry, it has not only the face of the franchise, but it has, in my opinion, the best evolution. And it has Zapdos, who is its own icon because of Pokemon Go, Go Team Instinct. And then, I know people don't really care for Voltorb or Magnemite. They think they're lazy, but I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in the design. You've got, obviously, the magnetism pulls Magnemite together. That's a very funny evolution. I think it's good that they got a add-on evolution later, so maybe Gen 1's a little lacking there, but I still appreciate them as they are. Voltorb looks like a Pokeball, because it's a Mimic, duh. And you could say maybe Electrode's a bit lazy, they could have done something different for the evolution, but I appreciate the visual pun of reversing the charge. It goes from right side up to upside down, and then the previously negative expression becomes a positive expression. You know, I don't expect that to sell everyone on Electrode, but I think it's a very fun design. gimmick that makes this otherwise very simple design actually have a little bit of depth to it. And then the oddball here, Electabuzz. I think everyone agrees Electabuzz is better than Magmar. Even I, with my own personal attachment to Magmar, I'm still an Electabuzz head. He's very cool. Yeah, there's absolutely no fat here. They're all bangers. Absolutely great selection. Second place is going to be Generation 2 again. Kind of similar to Gen 1, where there's just a lot of iconic electric types. You've got Pichu, you've got Raikou, you've got Ampharos. I think almost everyone's favorite Johto Pokemon is either one of the Eevees or it's Ampharos. Like, it's one of the three. Almost everyone falls into one of those camps. Unfortunately, it's just kind of playing second fiddle to Gen 1. Ampharos does not beat Jolteon, Pichu does not beat Pikachu, Raikou could beat Zapdos, but frankly, I would not bet on it. Third is going to be Generation 4. I, at one point, debated putting this in first. I think you've got the Rotom line, which is insane. All of the Rotoms are so well designed. You've got Pachirisu, which is honestly probably the best Pika clone. You've got the Luxio line. You've got two evolutions to two of Kanto's weakest electric types, and they are huge upgrades. I know some people are iffy on Magnezone, but whatever, it's my list. But ultimately, Gen 4 does not have the same star power that Generation 1 does. So while some of the designs are improvements, I would say overall, Gen 1 is just pulling its weight so damn hard. Still, all three of these gens have basically no flops in the electric types, which, you know, can't really be said for even my two favorite regions, Gens 3 and 6, some of the worst electric type reps in the series. What were they cooking? I am kind of surprising myself here. I always bash Generation 4 for having what is one of my least favorite new Pokedexes of all time. The new Pokemon in Gen 4 really disappointed me. But the fighting type selection here is actually pretty good. You know, fitting for the muscly type, there's very little fat here. You've got Infernape. I don't think it's better than Blaziken, but it is still really good. It's a very close second to Blaziken in the firefighting games. I actually really dislike Chimchar, but it's good because Chimchar isn't a fighting type, so it doesn't impact the score. Lucario is 100% overhyped. 100%. And I don't see the appeal as much as other people do, but it's still a pretty good design. It's still pretty solid. I have more respect for it than some of the other overhyped designs from other generations. And then you've also got Gallade, which is a very cool evolution, and kind of a sleeper pick, the Croagunk line. I don't know if it's just me watching the anime growing up or if it's me playing Pokken, but Croagunk is definitely one of my favorite Gen 4 Pokemon, and Toxicroak is a pretty solid evolution. That being said, this was a very close race with Generation 3. Obviously, if we're going for star power, I pick Breloom over Lucario every day. And like I was saying earlier, Blaziken I think is better than Infernape, but while I like Medicham and I like Hariyama, they simply lack the pizzazz of Gallade and the Croagunk line. I feel really fond of Makihita and Hariyama, but I feel just as fond for Croagunk and Toxicroak, so what is a man to do except to rank Generation 4 over Generation 3? Which pains me. Gen 3, you know, I love you. The second place is nothing to scoff at. The third place, again, kind of a shocker to me, is Generation 8, because I really dislike the Kubfu line. I dislike that they are pay to win. I dislike that their design is just bare in gi. I dislike all of the competitive aspects about them. The designs themselves don't really do anything for me. But putting aside the pay to win bear, I really like a lot of the stuff Galar and Hisui added for the fighting type. I love Sirfetch'd, I love Phalanx. Clobbopus is kind of a sleeper pick. Parker and I have been collecting a lot of the recent trading cards, and Clobbopus almost always has a good trading card. Like, he's actually a really charismatic little guy when you look at him. Hisui, the Sneasel line, Lilligant, and just Decidueye. Decidueye is such a good design that you really did not need to change him too much to make him fit the fighting type, and yet he still feels the most different out of the three Hisuian starters. Yeah, no, fighting is really solid in Generation 8, and it's mostly my apathy towards Zamazenta and my outward loathing to the Kubfu line that kind of holds Generation 8 back. I kind of hate this list. I kind of hate giving Gen 1 yet another win. I can't think of what to change, unfortunately. It's just, you've got poison in Gen 1. For those who don't know, there are 33 poison types in Gen 1. And I love this fact, I put it in a previous video. If you added all of the poison types from Gens 2 to 7, it's the same number as poison types added in Gen 1 alone. If it was all garbage, right, I would definitely rank another region above Gen 1. I'm not going for quantity, I'm going for quality. But, like, you have basically an unbeatable trio here of Venusaur, Gengar, and the Nidos. Kind of a quartet, if you want to count Nidoqueen separate from Nidoking. But those three designs are so popular and iconic that it is really hard for any other generation to compete. And then even the filler ones, I'm a big Venonat fan. I don't know what it is. I don't even like Venomoth that much. I'm just a Venonat guy. But he's very funny. He's very silly. I like Weezing. Weezing is a very creative design. People bash Grimer and Muck. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's secretly good. But Weezing, I think, escapes a lot of that critique because it's such an interesting what the fuck is that design. I didn't even shout out Tentacruel in the water type list because I don't think it's really competing with a lot of the water types there, but it's still a really solid design. It's a very interesting take on a monster jellyfish. Yeah, there's a lot of really solid poison here, and I think even if you're detracting some of the poison types here, you cannot deny simply the sheer amount of, first of all, poison in general, but also like the iconic poisons from this gen. Second place, and I can't believe I'm shouting out this generation so much. I still haven't played the fucking game. Second place is Generation 8. The Galarian forms are definitely a big help with Weezing and the Slow Twins. But then you've also got Toxtricity, which is definitely one of the most popular designs from Gen 8. I think it's pretty solid overall. I don't have as much attachment to it because I didn't use it in Scarlet and Violet and I didn't play Sword and Shield, but it's definitely really good. Eternatus is a really cool outer space dragon design. Very interesting, very unique. And then I love both the Hisuian families, the Quillfish and the Sneasel, both getting unique evolutions. Definitely very cool. Unfortunately, you are lacking a lot of, first of all, star power. None of these are more iconic than Nidoking, let alone, Gengar or Venusaur. But you are lacking quantity. Like, there's not a lot of poison here to go around. The designs are overall really solid, though. Third place for me is going to be Generation 4. Honestly, outside of the Stunky line, I am a big fan of everything here. I already talked about Croagunk. Everyone loves Drapion. And Badoo and Roserade are very good evolutions to Roselia. Unfortunately, the Gen 4 poison types simply just don't peak higher than the poison types from Gens 8 and 1. So it is third place, but it is a respectable third place indeed. Up next, we got the ground type, and thank God, because not only do we get to break up the Gen 1 win streak, we get to talk about Gen 3 some more. Honestly, the only weak points here are the Barboach line, and they're not even that bad. Everything else here, I will gladly go to bat for. We got one of the best starters of all time. We got one of the best dragons of all time. We got one of the best legendaries of all time. I even love Nincada and Claydol for getting weird with the ground typing. Just such a good selection overall. Second place is Gen 4. You've got Torterra. You got Garchomp. You got Mamoswine. You got Gliscor. Honestly, I'm a big Hippowdon fan too. Unfortunately, there's just a little more filler here than in Generation 3. Rhyperior, definitely a big punching bag for Pokemon fans, but I mean, I don't think it's inaccurate. I don't think the hate is unwarranted. It's kind of an ugly-ass design. And then you got Wormadam, you got Hippopotas. I love Hippowdon. I do not fuck with Hippopotas. It looks ugly. Why is he so bulbous? Ugh. So, unfortunately, there's just a little bit of stuff here that drags down the group by comparison. I do have to shout out Gen 1 for third place. It was really close between Gens 1 and 2. The main deciding factor in Gen 1 over Gen 2 is simply how many Gen 2 ground types feel lacking without their evolutions. Obviously, Gligar and Piloswine are lacking Gliscor and Mamoswine from Gen 4. But also, you get Larvitar and Pupitar but you don't get Tyranitar, because Tyranitar drops the ground type for dark type when it evolves. I still really love Phanpy, I still really love Steelix, I still really love the Wooper line, and the Pokemon I mentioned aren't bad, they just feel lacking. Whereas Gen 1, yeah, you don't get Steelix anymore, but Onix, you know, visually doesn't feel lacking. And Rhydon is kind of happy that Rhyperior is now here, because Rhyperior is ugly. And then you got Cubone, you got Geodude, you got the Sandshrew line, the Nidos are here. It's very hard to argue that Gen 1 does not have a stellar selection of ground types, although I will say Gen 2 came very close. Gen 6, so far, always a bridesmaid, never a bride, but this time, we're finally picking Generation 6 for first place. And you can just tell, looking at the anime, Ash Ketchum, he had Hawlucha, he had Noivern, he had Talonflame. He knew all three flying types were heat. And so, of course, he included all of them. And then Vivillon and Yveltal still aren't bad. Vivillon is kind of derivative of the other butterflies, but honestly, the other three are so strong that Talos by itself has a really solid flying selection. But then, you remember that Mega Evolution exists, right? You get to steal Charizard Y. You get to steal Aerodactyl. You get to upgrade Pidgeot. You know, Pidgeot's kind of boring. Mega Pidgeot's kind of got some sauce to it. And then you get Mega Rayquaza. Dude, like, not even close. Pack it up. It's over. Gen 6, you take the flying type crown. And then Gen 1, you gotta give respect to the classics. You got Charizard. You got Gyarados. You got Dragonite. You got a trio of flying types. You've got a second actual trio of legendary flying types. The main thing holding Gen 1 back is just the bulk. You know, you got your Spearow, you got your Farfetch'd, not really doing a whole lot, kind of dragging the average down. There's a lot less fat in the Gen 6 flying types compared to the Gen 1 flying types. Third is Generation 2. Obviously, having two legendaries doesn't hurt, two of the most iconic Pokemon in the series, but I really like the little weird flying types that Gen 2 added. You got Gligar, you got Natu, you got Yanma, Hoppip, like they're all not cool, but they're all funny. They're all little guys, and I like them. The peaks are much lower. They don't soar as high. Ho-ho, flying type joke. But there's a nice, comfortable plateau. There's not a lot of bad flying types in Generation 2. I gotta be real, guys. This is the easiest Generation 3 sweep of my life. This is such an amazing lineup of Psychic types. Psychic, I think, used to be my favorite type in Pokemon games. I've since graduated to preferring like fighting and ground. But I think Psychic was one of my favorite types because I was so in love with Gen 3 growing up. You look at the Gen 3 natives, right? You got Gardevoir, you got Metagross, you got Deoxys. These are contenders for the best Pokemon designs of all time, let alone just Psychic type designs of all time. I love the Weirdo Psychics, the Meteorite duo, I love the Baltoy line, the Meditite line, but I gotta be real with you guys, my third favorite Pokemon of all time is Wynaut. I've already gone on to tirade about how Wynaut is the best baby Pokemon in the Hot Ticks video. It is just such a peak design. It's a little slumped over doll, it's cute while also being creepy. It's Mimikyu before Mimikyu was a thing. I love Wynaut. He is my boy. He's so blue. Look at him go. Very funny smile boy. And I don't even like the legendaries that much. I'm not a big Jirachi fan. I'm not a big Lottie fan. But there's no denying that they're pretty solid. I think even if you don't love these designs, you gotta put some respect on them. Yeah, this lineup is amazing. Even if there's a little bit of fat, like Grumpig specifically. Not Spoink. Spoink is allowed to sit at the table, even though he won't sit still. Grumpig, you go elsewhere, buddy. But that does not take away from the fact that there is just so much heat in the Hoenn Psychic type lineup. I don't want to keep talking about Gen 1. I really don't. I want to shut the fuck up about Kanto and stop discussing it, but we're not quite there yet, I'm afraid. Because you got Alakazam, and the Kadabra guy is going to put some respect on the Alakazam line. You got the Slowpoke line, which I have already glazed to death. You got the Mew duo? Like, come on, man. How are you supposed to compete with a lineup that good? You can compete because there's a lot of fat here. You know, the Jinx, the Drowsy line, Execute, not Executor, Execute specifically. There's a bit here that's not the best. A lot of bangers, probably less bangers than Gen 3, and you've got a lot worse at the bottom. And I'm honestly surprised how much Gen 2 is coming up in the honorable mentions, especially because it hasn't actually won anything yet. But yeah, you definitely gotta shout out Generation 2 for the Psychic types. Espeon is practically the face of Gen 2 alongside Umbreon. You got Slowking, you got Natu. Unknown is such a fun design. Kind of like what I was saying for some of the other Gen 2 shoutouts. The peaks, not as high. The valleys, not particularly low. Except, actually, hold on, Smoochum's here. Alright, one really low valley. But overall, like a really good selection of Psychic types. And yeah, pretty respectable third place. Okay, next type up is the Bug type. I'm sure a lot of you people, you know, you either clicked on the video or once I explained the premise, you were probably thinking, okay, Gen 5 has gotta be the winner for the Bug type. You know, Gen 5 is always regarded as the generation that gave the Bug type some respect. Saved the Bug type's reputation from being this dumpster dive of a type, finally got some heat on it. I gotta say, it's a respectable second place. I think there is one generation that does Bug better than Gen 5. It's Generation 6. I'm kidding. It's not Gen 6, but there is indeed one more type. We're going to go one up, actually. We're going to go Generation 7. Gen 7, you have another really big fan favorite Bug type. I think Golisopod got a lot of love because you saw it on Guzma's team, you saw it in the anime. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's as popular as Volcarona, but it's definitely mogging a lot of the other really good Bug types in Generation 5. And then I think there's just no bad Bug types in Generation 7. I think the closest is probably Grubbin, but it immediately evolves into my favorite of the Cocoon bugs. Charjabug is so funny. I love Ribombee. I think it's a really cute design. I don't know what it is. Normally I'm not huge on pixie designs or whatever, but Ribombee is just so pleasant. What a little critter. You've got the other water bug line in Araquanid, also very good. You've got two Ultra Beasts, and even though they're both bug fighting, they both feel incredibly distinct, despite sharing the exact same typing, so that's gotta get some props too. Yeah, other than just maybe the Route 1 bug being kind of boring when you first find it, I think there's really nothing wrong with the Gen 7 bug types. I think it peaks almost as high as Gen 5, and it's not got any low points. Meanwhile, Gen 5's got a lot of really good bugs. I'm a big Galvantula fan. I love Leavanny. Scolipede I'm not as big on. I'm definitely more Team Leavanny than Team Scolipede, but Scolipede is still very good. But you've also got the Shelmet line. And at the same time, you got the Carablast line. And they got a fun gimmick. They got a fun gimmick where you trade them together. One steals the shell of the other. But I must say, the visual designs of all four kind of suck. They kind of suck. They're kind of bad. And there's not anything nearly as bad in Generation 7. So I'm going for the consistency here. Gen 7, I think, has more consistent bug type designs while still being competitive on the actual quality of each individual design compared to Gen 5's very solid middle of the pack bug types. But obviously Gen 5 peaks higher with Volcarona. Third place, once again, we're going to talk about Generation 2. I am shocked that not more people bring up Generation 2 as a really good bug region. Already, Heracross and Scizor save the bug type from being the absolute worst thing in the game, like it was in Generation 1. Shuckle has a lot of fans, myself included. I really like the visual design of the early route bugs, even though, obviously, competitively and in gameplay, they're very bad. I'm also a big Yanma enjoyer, as I previously discussed on the flying type. Pineco line doesn't really do anything for me, but overall, this is a very good selection of bug types, and arguably higher peaks than Volcarona. I would say both Heracross and Scizor are more iconic than Volcarona, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that friggin' Ladian is on par with Galvantula or Ribombee. That's crazy talk. Alright, up next is the Rock type, and I gotta be full front with you guys. This was a very close call. And I may be picking this solely so Gen 1 does not take another win. However, you gotta look at Gen 6 and its rock types. Obviously, getting the heat out of the way, the best fossil duo of any region, bar none. Tyrantrum and Aurorus, triple platinum in my house. But even beyond that, you get a little... You lost the plot a little bit with Binnacle. You know, I think Barbaracle is still really good. Binnacle is kind of the ugly duckling you gotta sit through to get to Barbaracle. Not a big Carbink enjoyer. I think it's a fine design, but obviously, you know, not really doing anything for me. But then you get into the Megas. And you only get two, really, because Diancie is already Gen 6. But you get to steal Aerodactyl and Tyranitar? Wait a minute. And they're both great Mega designs? Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, so it's a fossil sweep, unfortunately. I think this might just boil down to the fact that there are more dinosaur-like rock types in Gen 6 than in any other gen. But I don't care. I don't care, and I love dinosaurs, so I think Gen 6 has got to take it. The dinosaurs in Barbaracle are kind of carrying the gen, but that's a lot of carry. That's a lot of carrying. And then, I mean, I got to talk about Gen 1 again. Gen 1 is a close second place. Arguably could have been first. I do think there's a little bit of fat there, like with Gen 6. I like Geodude, but I don't like its evolutions. I don't really care for Graveler or Golem. Not really feeling anything on Rhyhorn, but Rhydon, of course. Rhydon is sick. Geodude and Onix are sick. All of the fossils are amazing. Very close call. Very close call, but ultimately, while there is more variety of bangers in Gen 1, Gen 6 simply appeals to me more. It panders to me, and I have to give it up. A very distant third is Generation 2. Tyranitar's peak, but everything outside of that is just good. There's no bad rock types here, but they're all just fine, right? Sudowoodo is fine, Magcargo is fine, Corsola is fine. I would take any of the Johto rock types over Binnacle or Graveler, but like I would never consider taking them over Aurorus or Rhydon. So Gen 2 is going to stick in second place. We're on to Ghost type, and you know what? Once again, I am surprised with how much I love Generation 8's variety here. Their Ghost types in Sword and Shield are really good. You got the Galarian Corsola line, you've got Runerigus, you've got Sinistee, and they're all pretty good. There's no bad designs out of these, I feel. And then you tack on Dragapult. Ooh, I think that's like a contender for my favorite pseudo of all time. And then you add on the Arceus ones. You get Basculegion, you get Typhlosion, you get the Zorua line. That's a really good roster there. I think the only real flops for me personally are Spectrier and by extension Calyrex Shadow Rider. But this is still a really good pick overall. And I'll be honest, Calyrex is a lot more tolerable when you don't look at it as much and you're just looking at the horse. So the bottom here isn't as bad as Calyrex normally is. Another really solid showing is Generation 4. You got the duo of Rotom and Giratina at the end of the Pokedex there. Insane combination, by the way. Very good Ghost types. While those are definitely the highlights, I think you got to give some respect to Spiritomb, to Frostlass, Mismagius. I do not care for Dusknoir. If Dusknoir had not been a cross-gen evolution and Duskull was here, that might have pushed the region as a whole to first place. I really love me a Duskull, but Dusknoir by itself not really doing much for me. This is still a really good selection overall, and I would definitely give it a hearty second place endorsement. Third place is going to be Generation 5, and you got two insane standouts in Chandelure and Golurk. And the other two aren't bad, Cofagrigus and Jellicent. You're just kind of lacking more, right? Chandelure is the star of Gen 5, the same way that Dragapult would be the star of Gen 8 for me. And you're not really doing a whole lot else once the stars go head to head. You know, just the sheer amount of stellar Ghost types in Gen 8 keeps Gen 5 out of the top spot, but definitely in the top 3. Alright, the last of the original types from Gen 1 is Dragon. And even without Megas, Gen 6 would take this. This would be a Gen 6 sweep, as it does not have a single bad dragon. I personally prefer Sliggoo over Goodra. I think Goodra's kind of a downgrade, but it's still pretty solid overall. And then you still got Dragalge, very unique design. Noivern, very slick, very cool guy. Zygarde, even just the 50%, very cool, very imposing. And then you get the Tyrantrum family, my second favorite Pokemon of all time. So even just Kalos by itself, this is a really good showing that I don't think any other gen competes with. And then you tack on the Megas. You get Charizard X, you get Ampharos, you get Sceptile, you get Altaria, and again, you get Rayquaza. Like, that is an impeccable lineup that even, you know, if you dock points for the Lottie twins showing up in the same outfit that day, not nearly enough to overshadow how insane this lineup is. Second place is going to be Generation 3. This is the first gen where they really started expanding Dragon Rep a bit more. You got Flygon, Altaria, and Salamence as non-legendary dragons. And then we got our first legendary dragons. We got the Lotties, who I don't really feel too strongly towards, but again, very solid design. And you've got the original Rayquaza. That is probably my bias talking, but I think that is the most aura any box art legendary has ever had. Rayquaza just fucking rocks so hard. I think a lot of people agree. They keep bringing Rayquaza back. They keep bringing shiny Rayquaza back especially. So I don't feel like that's too hot of a take, but yeah, this is an insane lineup. Just, yeah, not quite hitting the sheer variety of amazing dragons that Gen 6 has. Third place is going to be Generation 5. Definitely still lacking. Gens 1, 2, 4, and 5 were kind of stingy with the dragon type, weirdly. But you still got two really solid 3-stage lines here. The whole of the Axew and the Dino lines are really good. I don't care for the Tau Trio, I must admit. And Druddigon, I have no strong feelings on. No strong feelings on Druddigon, I would say. But these two 3-stage lines are so strong that they pull up this otherwise pretty poor performance, I feel. The first of the new types added in Generation 2 is the Dark type. You know, you'd think in 25 years, actually coming up on 27 years now, yeah, another gen might have come across the Dark type and possibly outperformed the original selection. You'd think that would happen, but Gen 2, cinching its first win, always a bridesmaid, never a bride, here she is. This Dark type selection's really good. I think the two weak points would be Murkrow and Sneasel, and the only reason they feel weak is because we don't have their evolutions here. Even then, they're pretty solid designs on their own. And then you've just got this really hard trio to shake. You've got Houndoom, you got Umbreon, and you got Tyranitar. These are some of the most popular designs in the series, let alone just strictly speaking Dark type. We've had iconic Dark types since for sure, but never this many in one generation. And even though only Umbreon is available before the postgame, I still gotta give it up for Gen 2. Having this many great designs, you start to understand why they were locked behind the postgame. They're trying to incentivize you to go seek them out. They're trying to hide all the heat in Kanto, so you keep playing. Second place is Generation 5. It came very close to taking the top spot here. Scrafty is such a great design. Hydreigon is amazing. I love the whole Sandile line from start to finish. They're all banger. I'm not a Zoroark fan, I'll be honest. Between Lucario and Zoroark, I'm definitely more Team Lucario, but it's fine. None of these designs truly beat out the Johto trio. I'd say the Crocodile line comes close, but ultimately, Gen 2's top 3 are all higher than Gen 5's second and third, if that makes sense. There's also, you know, some stinkers here, not huge on the Vullaby line. I think it's more interesting than a boring design, but it's still ugly. And I feel absolutely nothing towards the Purloin line. Third place, we're going to be talking about Gen 6 again. He's gotten started. Someone got him started on Generation 6 again. There's not many Dark types actually in Kalos. Obviously, you know, Greninja's the most popular Pokemon of all time. Pangoro's amazing. Inkay and Malamar are very good. The Megas are very stacked. You get to pull in Absol. You get to steal Houndoom and Tyranitar from Gen 2. You get Sharpedo. You even get to steal Gyarados, you know, for no reason. Just Gyarados is on our team now, actually. Very solid showing for the Dark type from Gen 6. Obviously, relying so heavily on the Megas keeps it from being much higher than this, though. The penultimate type is Steel. I've been showing Gen 3 a lot of love throughout this video, and a big part of that could be my bias. It wasn't my first gen growing up, but it was the first one I really latched onto. I admit that some of my Gen 3 picks so far might just be my own personal bias. I do not think you can argue that Gen 3 does not have the objective best Steel type selection in the series. Both of the 3-stage lines, Aeron and Beldum, are amazing start to finish. You've got Registeel, one of the best Regis and one of the best legendaries in general, I feel. Mawile is a very funny little creature, and a war criminal, Jirachi. I think this lineup is insane. This lineup is so good. There's no argument in my mind that Gen 3 does not take the Steel type spot. Second place is going to go to Gen 2. Fortress really isn't doing a whole lot, but you do get 3 insanely good staples outside of that. And it does kind of hurt that you're only getting fully evolved Pokemon. You're not getting full evolutionary lines. You're just getting the final product. But that does add a little bit of intrigue to the Steel type. Steel is a mature type. It's the evolved type. And that's a very cool feeling it has in Generation 2 specifically. My third pick is going to be Generation 8. I know some people are a little upset that we got a second regional Meowth in this game. I think they should have committed. I think they should have done a fairy type Meowth in Gen 9 so they get Meowth with all the new types. I think that would have been very funny. I really like Berserker. Cufant is adorable. Corviknight is a sick design. Hisui and Sliggoo and Goodra really make the design feel more complete. The shells add a whole lot to the design as it stands. Really, the only downsides are Origin Form Dialga and Duraludon don't really do anything for me, but otherwise, this is a really good showing for Steel type in Generation 8. The final type we're going to discuss is Fairy, and you would think, with the Generation 6 bias I've shown throughout the video, this is a Gen 6 sweep. Hell, even putting my bias aside, you've got an amazing trio of Fairy in Florges, in Sylveon, in Xerneas. Like, that's a really hard roster to beat. But you know what's better than a trio of really good Fairy types? Is a quartet. You got the whole Tapu lineage in Generation 7. And on top of the Tapus, you got Alolan Ninetales, one of the best regional forms that they keep bringing back outside of Alola because they know how great it is. And even outside of Alolan Ninetales, you got Mimikyu, the Pokemon that literally everyone likes. This forms its own trio, with a quartet in that trio. Like, there are so many good Fairy types in Gen 7, and I don't think there's any really bad Fairy types in Gen 7. I know Primarina has its detractors, but frankly, I can't imagine anyone looking at this and saying Primarina is worse than Dedenne, worse than Klefki, worse than Aromatisse. No, for my money, Gen 7's got to cinch the Fairy type slot. Gen 6 is still a very solid second. Like I said, that trio is very hard to beat, and while I do think there's some issues with the Gen 6 Fairy types, they don't counteract the strengths of the high-tier Fairy types too much. And then when you factor in Megas as well, you've got Altaria, you've got Gardevoir, you've got Mawile. Like, there's a lot of really great Fairy type Megas in addition to Kalos' actual Fairy type. So, very solid showing overall. Third place is going to be Generation 9. Tinkaton is another Pokemon that almost everyone loves, myself included. Definitely my favorite design from the gen. Dachshund is a very cute design. And then you've got a lot of Paradox Pokemon and Megas. And all of these Paradox and Megas are incredibly cool. I don't think there's a single bad one among them, actually. People dog on Clefable a little bit, but overall, this is a really good lineup. And I think the only thing holding Gen 9 back is how reliant it is on Megas and Paradox Pokemon to buff its fairy numbers, because otherwise you're just dealing with the Tinkaton line, the Fido line, and Pheasantipity, which has definitely gotten some mixed reception. Alright, thank you for sitting through all of my inane rambling. As you can see, I may have a bit of a bias. Now, see, I actually did not think my bias extended to Gen 1. Doing this list has been very informative. I've kind of realized I might be a pocket Gen 1er. I can't think of any of these types to move down, though. Every time I think, like, oh, maybe fire. No, not fire. What about electric? No. Gen 1 doesn't have great reps for all of its types, but the ones that it does right, it does pretty damn good. Gen 3 and 6, I was expecting, honestly, more. I was expecting more, and I think greedy Gen 1 stole a lot of their reps. And I'm very shocked that Gens 5 and 9 won nothing. Actually, no, I'm not shocked Gen 9 won nothing. I'm not particularly fond of Scarlet and Violet's new Pokemon. But Gen 5, that shocked me. I definitely thought there'd be one type where Gen 5 pulled through. Maybe they got robbed for Bug and Dark, and you'd rather I move those to Gen 5. But I think Gen 5 suffers from padding more than anything. There's just too many additional Pokemon because they were repopulating the whole region. And so some of those designs didn't pop off as hard as others. If we were going solely off of which generation had the single best design of each type, this list would look entirely different. This list would be completely upside down. Gen 5 would probably steal half of these types, really. This was a really fun experiment. I've been thinking of how to do a ranking video or a tier list video for a while, and this is kind of both. Thank you for checking this out and giving it a watch. Like I said, I have a much bigger, much more involved project coming up soon. I hope you guys enjoy that. I might be losing my mind a little bit making this stupid video, but I hope the final product is worth it. All right, I'll catch you guys later. Take care.